Hi, my name is Winsley, and welcome to this week's Beginner's Guide. Today we're going to be talking about tips that I have for playing on the Conquered Worlds map or planet type. They added this with the most recent expansion, the Invasions expansion. And before we actually jump into my tips, I did want to mention that you can only play on a medium map with 4, 5, or 6 players. Um, that is an important consideration because if you could play on a much bigger map, certain strategies would be valid that aren't valid on the medium map, and if you play on a smaller map, it's similar. You'd only have certain strategies available to you. So it's a pretty specific planet type with only a couple different ways to play. Although you can really play around with it depending on which side you're on. If you're on the side of the solo commander or the allied commander and the secret techs and races that you choose, maybe everybody is going to be the same secret tech and you can use all of the same operations. That could synergize really, really well. But when it comes to the planet type, there's only so much that you can play around with. You can change the landmass. That's cool that that's still an option. You can change the intensity of the AI stuff. And I believe if you go into advanced setup, you may be able to play around with some other things. Invasions is turned off, which is very, very sad. You can't use that to end the game. But yeah, you can use Doomsday. Doomsday is pretty cool. We'll talk more about that once we get in game, which I think it is time to do so now, right? We can only do medium. So yeah, let's go load up a save. I think we'll go to this one because it's at a good point for me to talk about stealing maps. So yeah, if you're playing as the solo commander, I really like stealing maps against just one of the AIs. If you go in here, you'll see that I have a 60% chance against this Kirko commander, and the other ones have lower chances. You want to take the one that has the highest chance of being successful because the results should be the same. That's interesting. When I did that in my actual playthrough when I was playing this, that was successful and I uncovered all the maps for all these cities, which is really, really useful information to have. We can kind of still see some important stuff like their orbital relay is here. Lost track of where on the map is. This guy's orbital relay is here. We can see their capital. You can also see this capital and their orbital relay. So we got some really, really valuable information. Of course, seeing everything would have been much, much better. And by taking that higher percent chance, you're much more likely to get the results that you need to make smart decisions. You can see where they're most likely to expand. I mean, if you zoom out and look on the mini map, you can still see quite a bit of information. It's kind of hard to see what's going on when you zoom in. It's just like a couple little patches here and there, but if you zoom out, you can tell that that this is like the shoreline here, and there's a little bit of land there. There's quite a bit of water here, and this is obviously our closest opponent, so we should go rush them as soon as possible and take out that orbital relay, the forward base with the orbital relay, before they can coordinate and group up. So yeah, that's tip number one. You want to steal maps against the allied commanders if you're playing as an overlord. If you're playing as the allied commanders, you may want to consider doing that just so you have the information to act on. But I think just scouting him out with a couple scouts, maybe some invisible scouts, would be the best course of action for the allied commanders. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, tip number 2, is researching is very, very important, especially as the overlord. It's always important, but as the overlord, you'll have more cities that can grab a research exploitation in the early game, allowing you to go for mid-game and late-game strategies a little bit earlier. As you can see, I put one here and one here. And I put an energy one down here because I did want a little bit of upkeep for my many units. This wouldn't really be a great research sector, but I do believe I did turn it into that because more research is better than less. If you really want to, you can use that to power through the Doomsday victory. If Doomsday stuff is enabled, you can yeah, you can get this stuff going, which will allow you to try and go for the Doomsday victory and all the nice little stuff that comes along with it, just that much quicker. So yeah, I think that is worth doing as the Overlord. What did I want to say also about, right? All right, we wanted to talk about orbital relays. So orbital relays are really important for both the allied commanders and the Overlord, the solo commander, to research. Once you've got that, you'll be able to move very quickly across the map. The allied commanders start with a free orbital relay, and being able to build more on your other borders is very nice. But if you're playing the Overlord and you take over one of these, you want to have the orbital relay technology so you can actually use that relay. You don't have to build it up yourself. So yeah, I think you should be going for that as the Overlord, maybe as the little allied guys. Maybe your capital gets wiped out and you have to relocate elsewhere. Having an orbital relay will allow your guys to coordinate very well. There's some cool bonuses that come with the later versions, the upgraded versions of the orbital relay, that will give your armies really nice boosts in combat. I think rapid reinforcement is super good. Yeah, it lets you. It actually doesn't make your guys better. There's a. That's part of this, isn't it? The first tier. Yeah, resupplied is actually really good. I think that's something that people overlook a lot. You want resupplied because it will give your armies. I guess it's not showing up resupplied. I think it gives you like plus 10% damage, and you can stack that with other locations on the map, which boost your damage or add other things to your stacks to like get more efficiency out of your lower tier units or even your higher tier units. You can turn fights that people aren't paying attention to. Like if the Overlord has to engage in a lot of different fronts, you can turn a fight that they thought they were going to win against them by using an orbital relay just to boost your guys up that much more. I haven't played too much around it, but it does seem like a nice strategy in theory. Yeah, I think we can now move on to the next tip. Yeah, if you are going to be casting a lot of operations, you're going to need some energy exploitations. You want lots of research exploitations. You can get research through anomalies, but I think having a couple of these and a couple energy exploitations, not just for upkeep on your units, but for casting those operations, will really help you out, because there's a lot of things that will boost your efficiency in this tree that people overlook. So yeah, like this will boost your accuracy and damage by 10%. And it's only 80 energy. That you combine that with the orbital relay resupplied thing, and you're going to have a stack that's actually very powerful in combat. You can also make the enemy a lot easier to deal with if you use your operations. And I think in this game type, in this planet type, it's more valid than in other ones. As the Overlord, you'll just have more resources to play around with, so you should have more energy that you can pump into things like operations. But even the allied commanders are more likely to have the energy for things like this, because they can trade with each other. If one person isn't in combat, they can build up a bunch of energy and then send it over to another commander, so that they can coordinate. They can use their resources as best as possible through coordination. I think we're ready for the next tip. Just reading what I put down here. Yeah, operations are good. You want your energy exploitations after research exploitations. Okay. Yes, one allied commander might want to research heavily into covert operations. You don't want all three of them going down this tree, because you don't need you don't need to um, double up on any of that stuff. Maybe you could sap all of his energy if all three of you were going for that. But I think it's better to diversify on the allied commanders and have like just one that can really mess around with the overlord and force him to take a little bit of operational defense. Um, yeah, the overlord should probably get as much of this defense as possible to make it harder for the other people to use operations on them and covert operations, not just covert operations. This applies to, I think, the strategic things that we were just kind of looking at. Yeah, it's a good way to cripple them with some well-timed things. Um, yeah, I did see in a stream that the devs did that sometimes it's worth abandoning your capital. If I take all my stuff and send it over here, it might be best for them to build a colonizer and send their units and their colonizer through there to one of their allies so that they can settle the space in between them. I think this one had the most space, so I would probably come over here and grab like maybe some of these islands or stuff to the south that's far away from the overlord. Or maybe you can build on the border and take the nice landmarks and locations there before they can move over. Although that doesn't seem like the best idea because then they could probably just take it off of you without fighting the landmarks. Fighting a player for the landmarks is easier than just outright clearing the landmarks. Unless you're playing on really easy settings, I guess that could make it easier than dealing with a player. Yeah, okay, I think that's everything in here. We can move on to my next tip, which is the Overlord should prioritize scouting out the other players, ideally with camouflage units so that they can just see them. Of course, stealing maps is a great way to do that, but I think after you've stolen maps, you may want a scout or two on the border so that you can see when they're sending units around how big the or how strong those stacks are, and if it's maybe just a colonizer, you may want to just pick off the colonizer here and there. That does seem to work well if you've got turn timers on, which makes sense for a multiplayer. So keep that in mind if you got turn timers on, or if you're playing on this map mode, scouting is pretty good. I know some people were saying you just want to scout. Scouting is always important, but I think it's just a little bit more important with the way that you know at the very beginning who your enemies are and who your allies are. You're gonna need to fill out the map to coordinate those wars better. The wars are gonna probably kick off faster and end a little bit quicker too. And the last tip I have is if you're playing as the Overlord, you've kind of got a bit of a timer. Other people can pump out more colonies than you because of the way the scaling cost works with colonizers. I believe that it scales just as quickly for the Overlord as it does for all of them, so they can basically get 3 cities for every 1 that you can. It's scary, so you want to act fast. As the allied commander, as the allied commanders, you can just kind of like try to outlast them, and you'll probably eventually have 2 of your players be stronger than the Overlord and just kind of crush them. But who knows if they'll let you take the time to build that up. So now let's go over some of the tips that I found online. This is one that I got from Discord from OrangeLux. I've played multiplayer with him before. He said synthesis operations work on all friendly units with the appropriate mods, so having everyone go synthesis is an interesting option. As far as races, Syndicate is strong to have around because you have access to runners. I know runners can be used to step on Cosmite collection things, and people won't realize that they aren't collecting their Cosmite because it's an invisible unit on there, and they'll only see it if they recognize that their income isn't as high as it should be, or if there's this little red outline around them. I have a feeling that's going to get patched out eventually. I don't think the devs were aware of that until recently, so I would expect that to go away. Devar is another good one because they can get a lot of really great early game production from prospecting sectors. I don't think I'd put all three of the commanders on Devar because they wouldn't be able to prospect as much individually. They'd have to share the prospecting. Um, but it's an interesting idea that I definitely would love to hear your thoughts on. It says that he also says the allies have a little bit of incentive to go with strategic summons to ensure that they can reinforce each other, and more importantly, be able to contribute their operation points to crucial fights. So yeah, if you're standing adjacent to another allied player, you can use your tactical operations to turn the tide of the fight. Just like one unit can really help you win a fight that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to, just because they can pump all their energy into those really nice operations. There's a couple that just do a lot of raw damage, and a couple that stagger. Yeah, laser strike is a nice one that staggers and puts burning on units, and I think burning makes people easier to hit, so that's a really nice one. As far as the Overlord goes, Xeno should be pretty strong. You start with a good economy, you just want more units, and the Plague is the quickest way to do that. Another person said something about Xenoplague for the Overlord, so I do think that's a nice option for you to consider. He's saying also that Orange Lex is still saying that you shouldn't intentionally abandon anything, but if you see a massive invasion going for one person, they should try to remain a plausible threat from as many directions as possible. So when one person is defending their territory and maybe sending a colonizer elsewhere so they're not wiped out, the others should be pushing on the other borders to try and take out the Overlord's economy, which I haven't seen done yet, but I think that sounds like it could work. If the Overlord doesn't have enough time to set up their defenses and clear out all the stuff around them, then yeah, I could see you just walking through their undefended borders, their frontier territory. Yeah, he's saying you have long-term advantage as the ally, so you just got to outlast them. And this is where he was saying you got to just prioritize scouting in a multiplayer. You can't overstate that enough. If you're playing against humans, you need to scout. Like, maybe you can get away with not doing that against AIs, but I don't know. Doesn't seem like a great idea. So Leon Fergus, who was, I believe, on Steam discussions, was saying they were playing as Kirko Heritor, and they've been having a lot of fun having their emergence evolve into more useful units. There's a lot of combat for the Overlords, so those units should get a lot of XP very quickly and then become quite useful. And in the past, I haven't had much luck with emergence, so I really like that idea of actually getting some good value out of them. But they also said that one of the nice things about being Heritor is their drained can dominate enemy units and also AI marauding units like the shepherds, which is just really good. You want the shepherds because they can revive people and heal people, and I think do a lot of damage from far away. I thought this was the stuff about a Xenoplague, but yeah, Xenoplague it's similar to the Emergent in that you can get a lot of good stuff from combat, so I think that is why it's good for the Overlord. Yeah, let's move on to the last set of tips, which is from Demand Red on Reddit. They said that you want to go for the secret tech victory or the doomsday victory. I was talking a bit about that earlier. Starting with more colonies means you can invest more in research, and without setting yourself back in other areas. You're always behind in colonization, so trying to compete military in the late game is just not going to work for them. They also really like Vanguard for them because of the militia integration, incentivize constructing garrison infrastructure, which is always something the Overlord should be trying to invest in to help them out in when, you know, people eventually do push into your territory. You're probably going to need that everywhere. Yeah, and they're saying that the Overlord will probably spend most of the game on the back foot, which doesn't seem right. I think in the early game, not so much, but in the if it goes on too far, then yeah, you're gonna be on your back foot and potentially probably losing the game if you let it go on too far. But maybe you can like push through one of them at a time and let them take a couple colonies here and there. If you've got good enough units, you don't need the cities, you just need the units. And that's all of my tips. Yeah, if you got any more for me, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I shared or what we could add to this list. I'm sure other members in the community would love to hear your thoughts as well. Take care. See you around.